Hello, everyone. Olá a todos e a todas. Bem-vindas e bem-vindos ao Wikidata Lab de número 26. Nós estamos aqui para falar sobre o módulo de referências estruturadas dentro da Wikipédia. Esse módulo é um produto, né, de um esforço. Ele já existe, mas a atualização dele é um esforço de trabalho do WikiCite, né, num programa de scholarship do WikiCite, e eu vou introduzir todo mundo em alguns instantes. É um trabalho coletivo, em grupo, que a gente tem realizado no último mês para atualizar essas referências, utilizar referências Wikidata dentro da Wikipédia. A apresentação vai ser em inglês, então eu vou apresentar o pessoal em inglês também. First, we have Mike Peel and Rex and Andy, and we have Alexander too, but he's not here at the moment. He will join us after. So I'll let, I think Mike has the presentation, right? To begin the presentation about the Wikidata Lab.
Yeah, actually, would you mind doing the introduction for what the Wikidata Lab is? I'll share my screen and just show the presentation. Oops. Okay, you should be able to see my screen.
Yes.
So yeah, just say welcome to this lab. So there's a group of us that have been working on structured citations module in Wikipedia. And so that includes myself, Mike Peel, as well as RexxS, Pigs on the Wing, and Adamant.pwn, as well as Ederporto. And we're from basically all over the world: Spain, UK, Germany, Brazil. So this is coming from Earth. Eda, would you mind talking through this bit?
Okay. So to everyone that is not familiar with the Wikidata Labs, this is an event, a series of events that the user group Wikimovimento Brazil is promoting since October 2017. It's almost monthly events that are held in the beginning in person, but then we have a COVID situation in the world, so this is became a online event this year. So generally there is 2 sessions, one theoretical about Wikidata and the integration between Wikidata and other Wikimedia or outside Wikimedia free knowledge projects. So we have Wikipedia, Commons, OpenStreetMap, and others. We have a dashboard, so everyone can join and we can track the edits and then analyze if everything is okay, so we can see who is participating and contact these people to work with them later or help if any help is needed. So this is the link, the tineural.com/WD Lab XXVI. We have also a Wikidata Labs Slack channel, so we can communicate and ask questions and answer questions about Wikidata related topics that we cover in this Wikidata Labs. The information about this specific event is in this link, I'll ask someone from the channel to post it on the comments of this video if you are watching on YouTube or Facebook or other platforms. Okay, now we begin.
Okay, thanks, Eda. So this is going to be a talk in two parts. So first we'll go through kind of the wiki editing side of things, and then we'll have a more in-depth go through the code. So Doug will do basically a walkthrough of the Lua code that WikidataIB runs, sorry, that CiteQ runs. Okay, so this is the overview. So the basic idea is that we want to use Wikidata to do citations or references rather than having to write them out by hand in Wikitext, which is a pain when you've got to work out where all the brackets go and all of the vertical lines go and everything. So it's a lot cleaner if you can just put it in Wikidata and use that. This will greatly simplify the code in the article, so it makes it a lot easier just to see the article text when you're editing without using the visual editor. And it also makes it a lot more easy to add the same reference to multiple articles, particularly again between all the different Wikipedia projects. So it's you can have the same reference in both Portuguese and the English Wikipedia article on something. If something changes with the reference, so if a URL changes, then you only need to change it in one place, which is on Wikidata, and everything else will automatically update. So it makes maintenance of references a lot easier. You don't need bots going around doing that all the time. Because it's completely multilingual, because Wikidata, everything is multilingual, using the QIDs rather than labels in a given language, and this is installed across different Wikimedias, it makes translating pages a lot easier. You don't have to figure out how to change all the kind of journal or title or author parameters so they work in the language you're translating into. That's just automatically done. This is mostly for journal articles and books, not really web pages at the moment. We'll talk about that a bit at the end. And it also makes it a lot easier to do tracking of references, and you can highlight when papers are being superseded or retracted by modifying it in Wikidata, and then you'll be able to add tracking categories and so on automatically. So this is the basic idea. You go from this big lump of text at the top, which is a reference to a journal article on the South Pole Telescope. Instead of having to write all of this wiki text out in detail, you just need to say reference, CiteQ, and the QID, which is the Wikidata item for that reference. So it becomes a lot simpler, a lot cleaner in the wiki text. The idea is this is highly configurable. So each parameter that you have defined here, so pages or archive and so on, you can overwrite those with local value if you need to, or you can simply suppress them. Although probably it's better to correct them in Wikidata if something odd's going on there. You have customizability of how many authors you want to display. You can display all of them, or you can just say display authors equals 4 and just display some of them. And also this automatically works in the local language by default. You don't have to worry about that at all. So this is an example of it live. So hopefully this will work if I go to the South Pole Telescope article. So this is, article about South Pole Telescope. This is live on English Wikipedia. If you go to the bottom of it, you can see all of the references, and all of these are completely generated from Wikidata. There is no manual referencing at all here. If you go into the article text, then you can see, sorry, it's a bit difficult on the screen, but for example, you've got CiteQ and a QID for the references. And if I just go to the bottom, you've just got ref list. So it's very clean in the article text and very clean at the end as well. If I just go back to the presentation, here's another example where this is again live in English Wikipedia. So suffix automaton, and if we go to the bottom again and look at the, sorry, it's a bit of a long article, this one. The bibliography, you can see all of these references, and again, they're all through Wikidata. So if I go again to edit source, Just make this a bit bigger. And then scroll down to the end. You can see, in this case, rather than being in line within the article, they're all linked at the bottom. So you've got CiteQ, QID, and this is using Harvard referencing. So it's got ref equals Harvard ID. And then you've got transclusions using Harvard referencing in there, which we won't go into the details of that here. Okay, so now I want to hand over to Andy, who can explain the WikiCite project. Andy, if you're ready to go.
Thank you. Nice to meet you all. So WikiCite is a Wikimedia project in the sense of being a user group or a group of people who collaborate in an endeavor to improve the content that is freely available for everybody to reuse, with specific focus on citation metadata. WikiCite isn't a set of software, it is not its own wiki, it is simply a group of people collaborating on an initiative. But WikiCite has its own mailing lists, its own discussion pages on Meta and on Wikidata, and it has real-life conferences, obviously online this year, but previously we've had meetings in Berlin and Vienna and elsewhere to collaborate. And about 1/3 of the content in Wikidata has been added as a result of the WikiCite initiative. So 1/3 of the content in Wikidata is about papers or the authors of papers. Millions and millions, in other words, of journal articles, scientific papers, and books or book chapters or other citation metadata have been added to Wikidata by this activity. We have a number of very active bots which are constantly updating and adding new material. So creating new items about papers that are cited, creating items about the authors, linking the authors to the papers, replacing author name strings, which simply list an author name as text with a link to a Wikidata item about the author, and recording which papers cite which other papers. So we have a citation hierarchy being built in Wikidata. And of course, one of the purposes of this is to make structured, linked open data available both to the wider world and to Wikipedia editors to cite using CiteQ or indeed other techniques in Wikipedias and other projects. We have tools like Scholia, which is an external hosted visual presentation of Wikidata queries and other material related to citations. So you can go on to Scholia, which I believe you may have had a separate presentation about previously, and you can see the relationships between authors writing about a specific topic or working for a particular institution, or you can see metadata about one author and all the people they've co-authored with and all the topics they've written about and the venues where they've published papers. And like all of Wikidata content, as Mike has already said, this is all fully multilingual. So it's available, even if the paper is in English or in another language, it's available with metadata which can be presented in the Portuguese or indeed any other language. And the address is there. Again, if somebody could put that into the chat, that would be useful for the main WikiCite page on MetaWiki. If somebody could change the slide, please. So one of the things that we do as people who are involved in WikiCite is to add citation metadata to Wikidata manually or semi-manually. So for large parts of the citation corpus, we have the bots running, and they import new and historic papers in large scale. But sometimes you want to cite a paper that you've written yourself or that one of your colleagues has written, or maybe one that you want to cite in your own academic work, and you want to cite that in a Wikipedia article as well, and it's not already there. So you can create it in a purely manual activity on Wikidata, simply in the same way that you edit anything else in Wikidata. But if you have the citation metadata in another form, if you have it in a spreadsheet or a citation management tool, you can use those tools to add it to Wikidata. And one of the commonest of those tools is Zotero or Zotero, which is an open source tool for citation management. It has integrations with Microsoft Word and LibreOffice and other authorship packages, and it has integrations with Firefox and Chrome and other web browsers. So it's very interoperable if you're moving citation metadata between one place and another. And it has importers for importing citation metadata from web pages and other places into itself, which you can then export into other places or into Wikidata. So it becomes a hub, not only for storing the citation metadata that you're using in your studies or your academic work, but for moving it between different places. And you can use Zotero to import metadata into itself from a web page, from a journal article web page, or from Amazon or Google Books or wherever it might be. And then you can manipulate it in Zotero, and then you can export it into Wikidata using quick statements. And again, I'm going to assume that you've already seen quick statements in a previous presentation, so I won't explain it in great detail, but in a moment I will show you how to use it in order to do that. There are other tools in Zotero. For instance, you can use SourceMD, and you can give SourceMD an identifier such as a DOI or a PMID for PubMed, and you can use SourceMD to import the metadata for you. But for doing the transference that I've mentioned between one place and another, or for importing groups of citations in tens or hundreds, then Zotero is a good tool to use. So I'm going to start sharing my screen and show you how I do that. So just let me share my screen. I have to allow this, so I'll do that. Okay, you should start to see my screen shortly. If somebody could speak and let me know when you can see that. Can anybody see my screen?
Not yet, no.
Okay, we'll take a moment.
Now we can.
Now you can, good. Okay, so this is a web page about a paper which happens to be about OpenStreetMap and Wikidata. And now I'm going to open Zotero. This is the interface for Zotero. I have it in a slightly small window. I'll just put that out of the way. But as you can see at the moment in this folder in Zotero, there is nothing present. So I'm going to minimize that. And on my browser, I have a little icon for the Zotero plugin, and it has recognized that I'm looking at Science Direct, which is the website that I'm looking at here. So it's using that importer, and it's importing that paper for me now. You can see it's saving it into my temporary folder in Zotero. And if we pop back to Zotero, and it hasn't imported. Let me try that again. I had this working just before the presentation, and of course, because this is a live demo, it's no longer working. Let me just try that in another browser window and see if I have more luck doing it over here. This is really embarrassing. So I'm going to close the software and reopen it and see if that works. Okay, well, I'm very sorry about that. That's completely failed, but fortunately, I have a version that I prepared earlier. So what I would normally do is the citation would appear in Zotero. In fact, I could probably do it with a different citation that I already have in my library. So let me try that. So now I'm going to go to Quick Statements. This is the Quick Statements interface. This is a tool by Magnus Mank, who sits on ToolForge. And when you go into Quick Statements, first of all, you have to sign in, which I've already done here. And then you have to create a new batch. And then you go to Zotero, choose your citation, and you drag it into the Quick Statements window. And again, this is failing for some reason. So let me just command it to use Wikidata rather than Wikipedia. It should recognize by context where it is. So now it has created a series of tab separated. You can see there's tabs here, statements here for the book that I happen to have in my citation metadata. And then you have to do some manual checking. So here we have the title parameter, or the title statement for Wikidata, and it says it's in an undefined language. Well, of course, I know that that is in English, so I've changed that to EN. And if I knew the QID of the author, I could create a statement here for P50 for the author. Let's say it's Douglas Adams, is Q42. So you can manually edit those statements before you publish them. When you're happy that your statements are correct, you simply import them into Quick Statements. You get a green icon here if they're correct. You get a red icon if there's an error. And when you're happy with that, you click Run. And it will create the item for you with all these values. I'm not going to run this one because it would create a duplicate, which we don't want. So I will just abort that there. But that is how Zotero and Quick Statements normally work together. I'm very sorry that that didn't import correctly. Let me have one more try in the hope that it might work this time. It says it's saving it, but it's certainly not going to do it. For some reason, that one has just failed. As I say, it worked earlier. This is the problem you have with live presentations. So if you want to use Zotero yourself,
Andy?
Yes? Edo, you trying to interrupt?
If you copy if you try to copy the DOI identifier, you can add to Zotero manually.
Oh, yes, of course. So you copy the DOI. Do you know where you do that?
In the second button, the next one.
This one? Next one? Ah, that's it, yeah.
Yes.
So there you go. That's forced the import that I was trying to do earlier. And you can see here, the metadata is in Zotero. So let me now put that into Quick Statements with a new batch. So if I drag this one in, which is the one I was expecting, what I was going to show you here is that it has put the author name as an author name string, which is P2093, and the author name is in quote marks. But I know the QID for the author. I found that one earlier, so I'll just copy that. I go back to Quick Statements, overwrite the name string with the QID, remembering to get rid of the quote marks as well, and change that to P50. And now when I import that one, it finds the author name, Elena Demidova, and the QID for the author are correctly imported. And when I create it, it will create a link to that item. So as I was saying, if you want to use Zotero in your browser, you download the plugin for your browser. You download Zotero itself, which is a free piece of open source software. But if you want to export to Wikidata, you also need to add an additional plugin for Zotero, which is at the page which is listed in the slides from Zycat, I think it's called, which is an external site, and they all work together. But the page on Wikidata about Zotero will explain how to do that. So I'll now hand you back to Mike, who will present the slides with that address in and the rest of the presentation. Over to you, Mike.
Okay, I will start sharing my screen again. Okay, can you see my slides again?
They're just going to take a moment to come in, I think, Mike. There's
Okay.
a bit of a lag. Yes, they're coming now.
Okay. So the next thing I want to do is just run you through what a citation autoreference looks like on Wikidata. So this is 10-meter South Pole Telescope article. So what you end up with is an instance of a scholarly article or a book or similar. You have the title, you have the author. Here you've got some which are wiki linked and some which are author strings, which is what Andy was just demonstrating, with the series ordinal, so the position in the reference list. This has a few authors, as you can see, not as many as some others. But Wikidata also has the language, the publication date, importantly where it was published. So this is a journal, astronomy journal, as well as the volume, pages, issue, and at the bottom you also got identifiers. So the DOI is a normal one. There's some astronomy specific ones as well for ADS bib codes, and the archive ID, which is the preprint journal as well. So all of this information gets stored in Wikidata and can be extracted using CiteQ. So CiteQ has existed for a while, I think at least a year or so, maybe a bit more. In the last few months, we've been working on a rewrite of that. So we've rewritten it in Lua code. Before, it was partly in parser functions, so the template coding style for MediaWiki, and partly in Lua, but now it's 100% in Lua. I'm going to summarize the descriptions of what it can do, but Doug is going to go through all the details of it later. It uses a common package called WikidataIB to fetch values from Wikidata and to reformat them. So this is the same as we've been using in the Wikidata info boxes you may have seen around Commons and elsewhere. So it's well-tested and reliable software that Doug has put together. So the code is a lot cleaner now, as you'll see later if you want to see all the developer side of things. So you can define simple properties, so the Wikidata properties that you want to include in your citation string, define at the top of the code, so it's easy to add more options later on. We've been fixing many bugs, so there were things like if you had multiple publication dates, they were being displayed and you don't really want that, so now that's fixed. So if you tried to CiteQ before, it should be quite different now. As I've already said, you can manually override values if you need to. Often it's better to fix it on Wikidata though if you encounter issues like that. Or you can set the parameter to unset to not show it at all. And just to give you an idea, this is the code. So these are all of the simple definitions for linking the properties, the property numbers to the parameter values that get passed into the standard citation template, and some of the parameters you can add in there. Again, if you're interested in this, please join Doug's part after this presentation. So another thing we've been doing is looking at all the test cases. So this is trying to find cases which break the module. So we've gone through a lot of different examples here. This is again live on English Wikipedia. Here you've got 2 copies of each reference because this is the existing version of CiteQ, the live one, and also the development version for the second line. So a lot of these are the same. You'll see some differences because there's a few changes in the sandbox. But basically, we've been testing a whole load of different cases, so duplicate dates, well, various things that you can look, if you're interested, you can look at there. You can do local overrides. It copes well with different languages, so it will identify whether the item is in Portuguese or in German, based either on the language label in the item for that article or the journal, the default for the journal. So the version on the English Wikipedia is the one we've been working on mostly, so that's been rewritten recently. We've also updated it on Wikidata itself, so if you want to use references not in the Wikidata items, but on talk pages and things like that, you can use it there. I think some of the wikis have also been updated, but quite often you'll find there's older versions that exist on other wikis and probably need just to be updated to the latest versions. So in the Portuguese Wikipedia, it's just been updated today, and it's under the CiteQ module. We'll be working some more on this this weekend, so there'll be another update coming up then. Particularly if you find any bugs during this session, then please let us know and we can implement those this weekend. But the dependencies will be the same, so if you want to install it on your wiki, then please go ahead with the current version and just do a minor update at the weekend. Okay, so I want to do a live demo to show you how to add a reference into a CiteQ reference into an article. So again, I picked a telescope item. You might have guessed I like telescopes. And here I want to look at this reference 15. So this already exists in the wiki text. So if I go here.
Mike, can you do a zooming?
Is that better?
A little bit more, I think. Okay.
Okay. So here is the reference. That's lovely and usable, isn't it? Not really. So we want to change this to be the CiteQ version. So there's two ways you can find the reference on Wikidata. So this is the detection of remote polarization by Bicep2. So you can either do a search for, this is the archive number. So if you know the archive or the DOI, you can do this has WB statement, the property number, and then the value here, which is not very user-friendly, I'm afraid, but that's the way it's currently working at the moment. Hopefully in the future there'll be nicer ways to do this. Or if you know what's...
Mike?
Yeah?
Magnus has a tool called Resolve, which does it for you. I'll post a link to a blog post about it into the
that's
chat
useful.
On StreamYard.
The other way to do it is just search for some keywords in the title, so Bicep2 detection in this case. And again, the reference will come up. So this is the reference that we want to add. So it's pretty much the same as before. So grab the QID, go back to the article. So CiteQ, I've not actually done this before, so it'll be interesting to see how well this works. So simple, CiteQ, QID, done. So let's go to the preview. So I'm leaving the old one in place so we can see what the difference is. So this was reference number 15. So you can see here it's pulled in all of the information. So detection of remote polarization is there. PRL is there. It's got the journal and the page numbers the same. Archive is the same. DOI. It's adding the ISSN, so that wasn't there before. PMID. And it's also displaying the QID at the end there. So that's basically worked. So now all you can do is remove all of the old text, which you don't need anymore because all of that information is in Wikidata. And put in an edit summary and publish. And that is then live in the article. I can't find it in the text, but if we go to the references, we will see 15. So that's all working fine. So that's a direct replacement of a reference. Obviously, most of the time you'd want to add references in instead, but this is quite nice for cleaning up the wiki text. And there'll be a lot of the different ones you can do here because a lot of these are journal items. Newspaper items and other things are not supported with this. Okay, so that's basically how it works. So just say that the work we've been doing has been funded by an eScholarship grant. So this is basically getting 5 of us together that are on this call with a Zoom connection, and we were working collaboratively over the course of a weekend to develop the upgrade for the software. It's one of a series of eScholarships and WikiCite grants that were given out. You can see the publication in there. As I said, we've got one more day we'll be doing this Saturday, and then we'll be posting a project report after that. So yeah, this is what we want to do next. So we've got one more day working on this. We can work more on that on it later if we want, but this is part of the WikiCite grant. So we want to resolve any remaining bugs, tackle any more feature requests people have, and write up the project report. So this module is now fully ready to be used in articles. If a community wants to do that, it can be a bit controversial in some wikis to use Wikidata. Hopefully this will be a step towards improving that. And also just to mention that there is an ambitious proposal to do something similar to this, but for all references, which Liam White is putting together at Shared Citations on Meta. So I'd encourage you to go and have a look at that and read it. So the idea is this will be something very similar. You put a QID, but it would be to a dedicated Wikibase, possibly. And you can put all different references in there. So please do go and have a look at that and give feedback and endorse if you want. So that's the first part of this presentation or this lab. So we've got a number of tasks that we want to do after this session. Of course, we've got Doug's session with the code immediately after this. So one of the things to do is to start using CiteQ in articles, either on the English Wikipedia or the Portuguese Wikipedia, which are currently set up to do that. So you can convert some existing references like I've demoed, or add some new ones. If you can think of any tricky cases where things are a bit different from how we might have expected it, try them and see if you can find any bugs. It will be really useful to make sure the software is as robust as it possibly can be. And please also have a look at the documentation and see if that is clear, see whether you can make or suggest any improvements to that. So here we've got some useful links to the template page, test cases I showed earlier, and there's also a tracking category on Portuguese Wikipedia for errors with references.
Mike?
Yeah.
As well as improving the documentation, of course, people can help to translate it.
Yes, that's a very good point. I think that links into this as well, that if you don't have CiteQ in your language Wikipedia, please do import it. So the main things you need to import are the CiteQ template, which is just a call to the module, the module code itself, and then there's WikidataIB. If you don't have the current version of that installed, then you need that. That's got a few other dependencies as well. That's all in Lua. And you also need the citation template, which is what is called by CiteQ. So CiteQ takes the information from Wikidata, reformats it, and then passes it into a citation template, which is normally local on your wiki. So it doesn't actually render the citation itself, it gives that to citation to do. And there's normally dependencies as well, I'm afraid, with that. You might need to localize the parameter names, depending on your setup for citation. The Wikidata is, of course, automatically multilingual. You may need to add some additional labels in your language, for example, journal names or some author names, maybe. Please do that. And as Andy was saying, please also translate the documentation. It would be really useful. Okay, so this has been a talk in two parts. So that was the wiki side of things. And now I'm going to hand over to Doug to do the Lua code. And please do engage on the chat channels and in Slack for if you want to get on with other things at the same time.
Before we move on,
yeah.
Mike,
questions. Yeah. Can you hear?
Yeah, I can hear both you and Eda.
Yes.
Okay, that's all right. Sorry, I thought I was getting some feedback there a second. You got a couple of questions from Joao in the comments. Do you want to take that one? I mean, I'm thinking we ought to take them now while they're still fresh in people's minds.
Okay, so this was a question on the demo. You had to go to Wikidata in order to find the reference. How hard would it be to integrate this search on Wikipedia? So there's no cross-project navigation.
Yeah, maybe
I can answer it as well if you.
Right. Yeah, go ahead.
Okay,
go ahead,
so
Mike. See what you
basically
think.
at the moment, no. There are projects to do something called the Wikidata Bridge, which is trying to bring editing Wikidata into your wiki. Probably that requires you to define the template already, so maybe that doesn't directly relate to the search. But there'll be tighter integration between Wikidata and Wikipedia in the future, but it's not there at the moment.
Yeah, I mean, the problem is that Wikidata Bridge exists and that it's actually been trialed, but it effectively allows you to use an overlay, a pop-up window within Wikipedia, which emulates part of the JavaScript interface on Wikidata. And that simply allows you to edit an item, a single item. Now, if you want to do a search across Wikidata, the problem is that the only tools we've got within Wikipedia are Lua, which is available for everybody because it runs server-side, and JavaScript, which is only going to be available on clients that run JavaScript. And the snag with that is that Lua simply isn't up to the job of running through the entire Wikidata database to do a search. So as far as Wikipedia pages are concerned, Lua, I'm afraid, is not a structured query language, even though we're almost writing one in WikidataIB. But the point being, you can't go through the straight database. So those sorts of searches are going to be technically impossible until we can find ways of leveraging the search system that's available in the Wikidata query service. Can I just ask everybody in the chat, am I going too
While
fast?
people answer that, Doug and Mike, I'm going to make my apologies. I have to leave you for about 45 minutes, so I'll see everybody later.
Okay, see you later, Andy.
Okay, well, nobody's complained about the speed of my delivery, but I'll try and close it down a little bit. There's another question from Joao, Mike.
I don't know how you highlight the questions. But is there a record on Wikidata that the QID is being used? We didn't mention this before, no. It's a good point. And if I can share my screen again, I can do you a demo because there is indeed a way of doing this.
Sorry,
so if I go back to
an international issue. No, I can't. I'm back again.
Okay, can you see my screen?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, so this is on Wikidata again. It's a reference that we're adding into the article. So if you go to page information on the left-hand bar, and then scroll down, this will say page properties, wikis subscribe to this entity, NWiki. And if you click on that, it will take you to the English Wikipedia and a special entity usage and the QID. And here you can see that this is a QID and it is indeed being used in the article there. So that's a nice, easy way to see that.
The same goes for the Portuguese Wikipedia. If you click there.
All language Wikipedias do the same. And there was a question about whether we're allowed to use CiteQ in the English language Wikipedia. Yeah, it's being used live, as I was showing earlier. There are some editors that do not like it, and you may encounter problems with them, but broadly, it is now stable. It is in a suitable condition to use. And if there are more bugs that people bring up, then please point them out. Yeah, the South Pole Telescope article I showed is using Wikidata quite extensively for the references, for the info box as well, as Joao says. So if you go into some different areas, topic areas on Wikipedia, you may encounter problems, but certainly for telescopes, there's no problem. Do you want to add anything to that, Ed or Doug?
Yes, please. I mean, technically, this is the grey area from the RFC on Wikidata Phase 2 that happened on the English Wikipedia years ago. And it's still the consensus that governs it. Basically, it says you can use Wikidata, you can fetch Wikidata in info boxes, as long as you do it carefully and with the consent of people in the area or in the article. And it says you really don't want to be using Wikidata in running prose. So within the main part of the article body, there is an expectation that we won't be using Wikidata to generate articles or sections of articles. However, there is a grey area for things like tables and authority control and templates, of which CiteQ is one, the references, which are out of the main body of the text. And I think that really needs to be looked at on a per case, make test cases if need be. But at the moment, I think that if people raise objections to CiteQ, then maybe the answer is to try to address those objections. I can't tell you what it's going to be like on the Portuguese Wikipedia, but no doubt Eder would be able to comment on that.
Yeah, on Portuguese Wikipedia, we have a few restrictions of not really using the Wikidata modules to fetch information, but to basically is where this information will go. If we want another info box, for example, we can't create, but we can modify the existent ones to fetch information from Wikidata. If the user doesn't want the information from Wikidata, they have the autonomy to overwrite the values from Wikidata or suppress them. So the user has the user of the module or the templates have the autonomy to decide either if they want to use the Wikidata information or not. But I think, especially with the Embabel tool, that creates a draft of an article, and we made it on Portuguese Wikipedia, the election, Brazilian election template that basically creates a almost complete draft of the elections. So it's well accepted in this area, and I don't see a major objection to the use of Wikidata. Half of the info boxes of biographies in Portuguese Wikipedia is from Wikidata. So I don't see a movement to, like in English Wikipedia, there is a lot of people engage in the discussion to either approve or deny the use of Wikidata. In Portuguese Wikipedia, this discussion has been always with low engagement of people on both sides, so a small amount of people. We have another question from Thiago. Wikipedia's visual editing tool already takes Wikidata IDs, which resolve to a proper reference. The visual editor does not use CiteQ yet, or does it? Do you know the answer? I don't think, because it cites Zotero and the box.
Yeah, sorry. No, it doesn't use CiteQ. The visual editor can use CiteQ because you can insert any template using CiteQ. But if you're talking about what I think of is Citoid, which is a part of the MediaWiki extensions. And what that does is it allows you to use an identifier of some description that will resolve to a reference. And that's fine. You can use a URL and you can use a PubMed ID and one or two other things to get a reference. The problem with it is that it doesn't always give you a full reference. And what it does is it inserts the text. In other words, it effectively substitutes so that you just get the text in there. That means that it won't stay up to date. If you use CiteQ and you, at some point, somebody adds, let's say a book hasn't got an ISBN number or something like that. If somebody adds that to it, or there's a PMC for a medical article, PubMed Central ID. If somebody adds that on Wikidata, it will show up the next time somebody looks at the article using CiteQ references. So it keeps it up to date by doing that, whereas obviously if you just simply import the text into the article, it's not going to do that.
We have another question. I found a reference to Exchange and the original as an archive link of the source. How can I preserve that? Should I?
I can answer that, I guess, if I just share my screen again. So there's several options. It depends where you found it. So you may have a property you can add, like if you find it on archive, you can add the archive URL just with the identifier. Or if it's at a different URL, say if it's on a university web page, which is not quite the same property, there's a property full work availability URL, and you can just put in the URL in there and save that. This is the property in more detail. And then that link will be used in the reference as well on CiteQ. Okay.
Okay. I think we don't have any more questions for now. We can start the two-part.
Okay. Okay. Well, this is going to be you listening to me while I work through some code in Lua. So if any of you have no interest whatsoever in Lua code, it might be time to go and make a cup of coffee. You can have a brief break and stretch your legs. Otherwise, I'm going to go straight into sharing my screen, and I'm going to share a copy of the module CiteQ. And can you let me know if that's showing up on your screen?
That looks okay.
It is.
That looks okay. Is the Zoom reasonable enough for people? Okay, I'm going to assume that, oh, enlarge.
I think that was for my...
Oh, right. Okay.
Yeah, this was a previous...
tell me now if you want this bigger, because it's getting a bit... getting just a little bit ridiculous. Yeah, I can make it bigger, but obviously I want to be able to see a line per line. Okay, there's the CiteQ. Now, this isn't the latest version. We've got a much updated version on the sandbox, and if people are really interested, they can go and have a look at that. But we need to test everything before we integrate it, and we need to agree if any of the changes that it makes are going to be positive. So here we go. Just at the first bit of it, just in setting up, this might be of interest to some people. We have a piece of code that we import, and that stops us from writing global variables, which are generally considered evil. And so there's a little module on the English Wikipedia, and probably on many others. Yeah. Hey, Nicola. Yeah, good man. Nice to see you with us. So we then pick up module WikidataIB, which is a 3,000 line module that does the importing of data from Wikidata into Wikipedia. Now, on the one hand, it was designed for info boxes. So it's got a lot of functionality to do with info boxes that we're not going to use in here. So it's actually a bit overpowered for the job that we're asking it to do. But on the other hand, it exists, and it's probably on your wiki anyway. So we might as well make use of what's in there. And we can have a function called getValue, which is pulled out of WikidataIB, a function called getProp of prop, which is, again, and follow QID. And essentially, that follow QID, which the code for which is not in here, does nothing more than try to find a QID for the current page, or for the page that you ask it to if you supply a QID. Get prop of prop is very similar to get value, but kind of one step removed. Get value simply takes a property and the entity ID, what I'll call a QID, and returns the value or values of that property. And get property of property does a very similar thing, but if the property value which is being returned from the article that we're considering is another Wikidata entity. So, for example, the author, instead of being a string, might be a name which is supplied as a QID. It can look into that second entity, that particular QID, and retrieve a property from there. And I'll show you a little bit more about how that's used in a moment or two. So the first thing to note is that it has an entry point here. This is the main function where everything starts. And just to give you a very quick overview of what it's doing, it takes a list of properties that we want to display, and it looks in the target article for those properties, and it assembles those properties into this here, this CiteQ args. That's a table of values which are the ones that we're interested in. And eventually the idea is to assemble a set of values that we can pass to an existing function. And that function is the citation template. So on English Wikipedia, we have a template called citation, which is a generic, well, it's a template to start with, calls a module, but that deals with all of the formatting and setting up of the citation. So in fact, what we're doing is we're making sure that we use exactly the same mechanism for generating the actual citation which is displayed as you would do if you did Cite Web or Cite Journal or Citation. And so the idea is collect together everything that we need and then pass it out to the citation template and let the citation template return it. And put a comma on the end if it happens to be CS1, if we've said, if the mode is CS1. And then we add a Wikidata identifier on the end because that's not part of the citation template. Okay, so let's see if I can take you through these. This is where it picks up the parent arguments, and that is what you use if you want to call it from a template. So if you use a template to call a module, then inside the module you can actually read any parameters that are passed from the template. They don't have to be passed explicitly. You can just call the hash invoke for the module, and whatever parameters are available to the template will become available to the module through frame get parent, and they pick up the args. The args are the list of parameters that are passed. And basically what we do is we copy them all into something called CiteQ args, our own copy of it. And then we go and have a look, just in case something's been called through a hash invoke, the module is called directly, we read the set of parameters, set of arguments, which have been passed directly through a hash invoke, and add those into the mix as well. So CiteQ args will now contain everything that we've passed as a parameter into CiteQ. And we want a system really where we don't have to pass anything into it except a QID to tell them what the entity is that we're going to use. And that's how we pull that out of there. So we pick that up, and then once we've taken it and got a local version, we blank it out, and we do the same for this, whether or not there's a Wikidata link, which isn't actually going to be used at the moment. And we blank both of those out in this because we don't want to pass a QID or a Wikidata link through to the citation template. It'll simply complain about it. So we now have those two things as variables in this function. We're then going to start looking at what we can get. The first thing we're going to do is we're going to try and pick up a language. And the things that we need for getting a property of a property are the QID, the first property, and the second property. And what that will do is it will look for the property P407 within Wikidata. So if you look at a typical Wikidata entry, it will have a whole load of different values, but if you put your mouse over each of them, you'll get the property for that one. And we're obviously having to deal with P407, which is a language parameter, and it will take us to another entry for that language, and that will enable us to pick up the language code. So if that is English, then that property will be EN. If it's Portuguese here, then this will be PT, and so on. Obviously, you're used to that kind of thing, I hope anyway. If we don't pick up anything, if there isn't one, then it could come back as an empty string. And in this particular case, we're going to treat empty strings as if they're nil. It's also possible that that language could have been passed through in the CiteQ template. So you have the opportunity, if you're using a CiteQ template, to add another parameter called language equals, and you can actually change the language of your citation within the call itself. Language equals FR, and you should see the citation coming out in French, and so on. If not, it's going to read the journal article itself and see whether that's in a particular language, the entry from there. If we still haven't got anything here, we will actually check one more step through to the journal itself. So we'll look at the journal and we'll try and find out whether that's got a language defined. So we're looking in the actual citation to see whether it's got a language defined, and then we're looking in the journal that it's published in, assuming it is published in the journal, to see if that tells us a language. And that obviously is only going to happen if we don't pass a parameter ourselves, which will override all of it. All of the Wikidata stuff that we're writing is always susceptible to being overwritten by a local parameter. The whole thing is set up so that you can use any parameter that it picks up, you can actually use as a value straight away locally. So in fact, you could actually change your citation to CiteQ and retain all of the parameters that you've got in there and use the local ones instead of picking anything up at all from Wikidata. Kind of no point in that, but it allows us to do overrides if we're getting erroneous or maybe inconvenient displays from Wikidata, which does happen at times. And the rest of this part here now is getting the properties, and right up at the top we've got a definition of different things. So publisher is P123, OCLC, and so on. And so this little table here, called simple properties, is a table of all the things that we want to pick up. And in the latest version, this is a lot bigger. And we're setting one or two little parameters within it. We're going to limit the number of publishers to 1. So if for some people, some reason, there's more than one publisher, it's going to pick up the first one that it comes across. Really, that's compulsory, because the citation template isn't going to let you get away with having multiple publishers. You're going to have to decide on which one you need and stick with that one. That means that Wikidata might need to be cleaned up. It might mean that you need to make it a preferred value if there's an alternative. But essentially, you can't have more than one publisher in this particular setup. Again, for most of the other things, places, there's not a limit on the max values. Something might be published in New York and London, and it allows that to happen. But it takes the links off them so that you don't get a linked London and a linked New York, which is a bit, I don't know whether it pollutes the metadata necessarily, but it's not the sort of thing that's necessary. And so on. And here we have an issue, which is interesting, because this now has a parameter called populate from journal, or a key that says populate from journal. And what that will do is that we can look for the journal, not just from the citation entry in Wikidata itself, but also if the citation refers to a journal, it can read that particular journal entry to see whether that quotes an issue for that particular item. And the same for the ISBN and the same for the ISSN. So there'll be quite a few of these that are not used very often. Screenwriter, how often does that come up? But it's there anyway. And there's a note here, some of them go to the other section. So let's go back to 236, which is where we were. This part of the code goes through. It does a get value. It passes the ID. It passes QID, and it passes the max values and whether or not you want the data linked. And get value, which is the WikidataIB call, handles all of that for us. However, what it will do is if this is supplied, if this isn't null, that means if name hasn't already turned up as being one of the named parameters, the local parameter. So if we've said name equals and the name of an article, then that will override fetching it from Wikidata. And then we go through looking at if the populate from journal is set, then it will actually look and pick up the qualifier. So there might be a journal name, which is a qualifier of the property, and it can take it from there. And if that doesn't work, it can look to see whether that links to another entry for the probably for the journal. That's the place that we'll be looking for it, if it exists, and it will fetch a name out of there if that is available. So it can look not just in the item itself, but it can look at the journal that it's published in, and that will allow us for things that we're populating from the journal. Name in this case isn't any particular value, it's publisher, OCLC, or whatever it is that's in there, and that gets used later on. But if it's one of these, it looks further to see whether it can find the information if it's not there. If it picks up this particular thing, category articles with missing data information, that's a problem. That means that there is no label in your local language for that, whatever it is. It could be the title or whatever it is that we've got to at this point, the publisher's name or whatever. So if there's no label in there, then it's going to start looking to the native language for the work, and it then looks back for the property of the property again, the language and the language code, and then it tries again to see if it can get a value for the item that we're looking for, which is called name at the moment. And then otherwise, if it still only gets the QID coming back again, we say forget it. We're not going to display QIDs in there. That item just is not going to be supplied. And if it's in the others section, then we're putting it into another table which picks those up. And at the end of it, we're going to glue together the others from the table with a full stop between them. That's the separator. And then we can pick up the journal itself. We're looking to see if there's any quotes, sorry, not quotes, if there's any italics at the beginning, and we strip those out, or if there's any italics at the end, we strip those out, or if they're immediately after a pipe, and so on. So basically, we're stripping out bits and pieces of wiki formatting from the journal name so that we can pass a clean piece of text into the citation template and let the citation template decide on the formatting. And so on. We're picking up other stuff. There are occasional things that we have to clean stuff out of. The OL, we have to put things in, strip some stuff out. The same will go for the bio archive. If it exists, we have to glue 10.1101 / onto the start of it to make it usable by the citation template. And if we've not got an ISBN 13, we'll try and get an ISBN 10. If we've got a URL, if we've not got a URL, we'll try and fetch it from the official website entry. If we haven't, if that doesn't work, there's somewhere else. Oh, just if there's a URL entry in the item. And then basically we look to see if there's a site link on Wikidata for the value and a label. And if there isn't a label, it will look to see whether we've got a language, and then we'll look to see if there's a language in a label in that language. So that allows you to use other languages than the ones that you've got set. And that's also pretty useful for multilingual wikis like Wikidata and Commons and so on. Not that I think there's that many references used there, but that's a fairly standard ability that we want to be able to build in. And effectively from the next of it, it's just a matter of picking things up. There's the title. Then we'll make it a link to it. And if not, we check to see whether the label and the link are the same. If they are, we can just make a single link. We don't need to pipe it. Otherwise, we clean off the site link for any disambiguation stuff to display, and then we use that with a link to the article in your language. And if none of that happens, if we haven't got the site link, then we just use the label for a display, a plain display. We're going through various other parameters now, pages, just a matter of cleaning those up so that you can use odd bits and pieces, pages or P, and make sure that we have the right thing. In the citation template, if you pass the parameter pages, it produces PP, and if you pass page, it only produces P. And then there's just one little check. We allow the value unset, and that allows you to write, for example, if there is a problem or something that you don't want to be displayed, then you should be able to suppress it completely. And we use the keyword unset. So if you write OCLC equals unset, then it won't appear. It just simply clears it out. And then authors. Authors are the biggest bugbear because they can be in so many different formats, first and last, an author string or so on. And essentially we still haven't got this absolutely right, but we've made a fair amount of progress on it. It's looking for the author, and we're looking for author or author one, which are things that you might get there. So if you haven't got those set, if you haven't passed them, then it uses a function that it's defined above called getNameList, with the word author. And then there's a similar one, getNameList, with editor for editors. And the idea is that these functions actually directly modify this table here of arguments. And if I look for that, back to the beginning, there is the function itself, getNameList. And this one's a rather old piece of code. It needs tidying up and updating, but you go through it, you use P50 for author, P2093 for the author name string. And if it's an author, you're going to use P50 then with a fallback of that. And if it's an editor, then it's P98, and we don't have a fallback for editors. If we don't have anything specified here, back we go, just drop out of it. That obviously shouldn't happen. Forget about that, that's just whether or not we actually put the link into Wikidata. And here is some old-fashioned code where we read the entire thing. All of this needs updating. That's another job for us to do. But essentially what it's doing is it's looking for a set of properties, because obviously you can have multiple values. And there's the fallback. If the property doesn't exist, we'll try the fallback one. That really needs to be replaced by a cheaper call. If we haven't got either of those properties or the fallback, then we've got nothing. So what we're going to do now, we know we've got something, we're going to go through, and this is basically nicked from WikidataIB inline. It'll be easier just to use it. but essentially, this is what we do. We keep track of a position, and if the authors have got a qualifier which tells you a series ordinal, the position in the list, it picks it up and puts it into a particular position in this table that we're creating, or these two tables we're creating. And if we've got something, we'll put the label in, that's the label for the author's name, but we're keeping the link to the author if it exists in this table called link. And we have to look to see if there's we've actually managed to get anything. If there's a site link, we're not going to really bother with that, to be honest. That would be something that gets used to try and see whether the label exists on the site, but it's too expensive, so we won't do that now. Again, the Wikidata link. This is just whether or not there's a Wikidata logo on the end of it, which never gets used anymore. And failing all of that, we just give the label for the author. This is the author's name we're talking about. And then we do the same sort of thing with the fallback. And the idea is that code needs to be put together like this. And this is essentially just sorting through and pulling out the table. In this table we've called out, which is where we've put all of the stuff. We've tidied it up. It could be in any sort of shape, any order. So now what we're doing is we're condensing it down and turning it into something that goes 1, 2, 3, 4, and so on, which we can now sort. And we actually write them out for debugging purposes. But here, we're creating the entry in the CiteQ args, which is passed as args here. And we're creating an entry for those directly in that table. So author 1, author 2, author 3, editor N, the same thing, editor 1, 2, 3, and so on. And if there's a link for them, we'll put that same number, the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, as an author link or editor link, and we pass that in there. And that's what that function does. And essentially, apart from this little note, this little function here, that sums up pretty much everything we've done. The last little bit here is this. We go through the authors and count them. It's the cheapest way of doing it, rather than messing with the code up above. Obviously, if this had been done when the first bit was written, we wouldn't have used the first bit. We'd have simply just kept track and passed that back out of the get name list, but we didn't. Anyway, the author count is quite quick and easy to do. Just count how many there are. And we've used a convention from astronomy journals that Mike suggested, that if the author count is more than 8, so if you have more than 8 authors, we're just going to use 3. And so we set display authors to 3, unless it's already got a value, of course. So if somebody's already set display authors is 5, that takes precedence. So what we're doing here is if there's more than 8 authors, we're going to cut it down to 3 et al. Those numbers there are subject to a certain amount of discussion on how many you want. We'll come to a conclusion about what the best values are. But the problem is that some things have literally got hundreds of entries, hundreds of authors. And really, although you can have something with 100 authors, if you make the citation yourself, you might well put quite a lot of authors in, but you'll usually put display authors equals a particular value, and that then gets us to the stage where manually adding it allows people to have sensible numbers of authors displayed. Unfortunately, if you fetch it from Wikidata, you don't know in advance how many authors you're going to have, and so you need to make some decision on what's a sensible maximum number of authors to display by default, although it can easily be overridden by using a display authors. So if you know there's a dozen authors and you want to show all of them, then you can simply set display authors equals 12. And unfortunately, you have to go and have a look at Wikidata to see if that's the case. But if your author list comes up with an et al, then you might well have a quick look at the Wikidata entry just to see whether you might want to just put another few on there if you think that's important. And the same thing for the editors. And then once we've got them all in this table here, table of arguments, we pass the thing to the citation template, and that does all the work of making the display. And as I said before, we just put a comma and then the Wikidata. If it's CS1, it's a comma. If we haven't set the mode, if it's not CS1, we put a comma. And if it is set to CS1, we don't. Otherwise, we just glue on this. This says edit at Wikidata or Wikidata or something like that. And that's the link to the thing. And then we have the actual QID inside a link. And this is to reduce this cluttering of things here. And that returns that back to the end of the thing. And there's the end of the function. And that's it. Okay, sorry that's been a bit of a marathon. I hope you haven't all all checked out. Now, Mike's got some comments here.
Yeah, it was just a comment with the links to check whether a page exists. So you said this was commented out. So the community wish list for 2021 has just started. And one of them that I put in is actually for resolving this particular issue.
Yep.
So you may want to go have a look at that.
I mean, WikidataIB actually does do that. If you don't have a site link in your... Oh, I've got an echo now. Just let me back off a little bit. If you don't have a site link, then it will actually look for the label. And if there's... It then can take that label and it can look on here if you know that it's here, you can check to see whether that is a redirect. So on the English Wikipedia, for example, to take a simple example, you can have one article on archaeology, but it deals with archaeologist. So the profession also is the link for somebody who belongs to that profession. So archaeologist is a redirect to archaeology. That means on Wikidata, you don't have a link, a site link for the word archaeologist because it's already used for archaeology. That means if somebody has an occupation of archaeologist, you can't get a direct link. There's no site link on Wikidata to make a link for you. And so what we do is we check to see whether there's a redirect. And if there were an article whose title was the same as the label, if it exists and it's a redirect, then let's link to that redirect. But if there's no site link and it's not a redirect, but we have an article existing with the same title as the label, it's probably a disambiguation page. So we don't want to link to a disambiguation page. We just put the plain label out. Anyway, that's what we don't do, because people hate this bit. That call there, for reasons best known to the developers, makes an entry in what links here for the destination. So people complain about it because they do tracking categories and then they find the thing popping up in their maintenance categories, and they don't like the fact that it's come because we've had to make that call from Wikidata. And as Mike says, we might get that at some point resolved. Okay, anything else? I'll take some questions if you've got any questions.
I think we're all here as well. All 5 of us have been working on the project. So if there's any questions in general about CiteQ as well, feel free to ask.
Shall I stop sharing my screen now? And we can get back to how we were.
Yeah.
Okie doke. There we go. Okay, I'm going to mute, and I'm going to hand back for whoever wants to pick up for the next point.
I think we're basically at an end, unless there's any more questions. I think this is normally the point where we go have a coffee and some sandwiches. Sadly, can't do that today.
Yeah. I think we don't have questions on the where is being streamed, so we can wrap up and go to our practical activities. Oh, I think Andy.
Shall I share my screen and just summarize those practical activities again?
Yes. And now that I know that I can post links, I'll post on the comments as well.
Can you see my slides again? Okay, so these were the tasks. So you can either start using CiteQ in some articles on English or Portuguese Wikipedia. So converting existing references or adding new ones and finding some tricky cases. There was actually one that came up in the Slack chat, which is if you have author equals unknown value, then you will get an error in the current version. That's fixed in the next one. For now, ideally you want to use author equals anonymous in there instead. And also please suggest and make improvements to documentation and translate it. And then if you don't already have CiteQ in your language Wikipedia, or if it's outdated, then please import it and see how well it works. So these are the modules you need to import, and you might need to do some localization for parameter names, and you might need to add some additional labels in your language, and please translate the documentation. I guess if you have any questions, is the best place for that the Slack channel. Eda, I'll pass back to you.
Yes, we have a Slack channel. So for this Wikidata Lab and for the between the Wikidata Labs. So this is the last one this year, but we'll start another batch of Wikidata Labs next year. Hopefully, a hybrid version, and then in the end of the year, hopefully full presential Wikidata Lab. But it's I think it's good that we have the Slack channel. We have also our usernames in the beginning of the presentations. Everything will be linked. I think the slides as well in the event page on Portuguese Wikipedia. So I think in the where people are watching, there is the link for the event page. There is Facebook or YouTube. That's it. We don't have any questions. João is thanking us for the presentation. I'll put his comment on the screen. Great presentation. I think I'll need to watch 10 times the Lua presentation. Okay, I think we can end the presentation. I'll end.
Thanks, everyone. Have
Bye,
a great
guys.
Christmas.
Thank you so much.
Thanks for watching. Bye.
Bye.
You too.